Call the meeting to order. Start with a roll.
Sure. Chairman Zucker,
Here.
Vice Chairwoman Boston Alvarez.
Here.
Mr. Spur is expected but not yet present. Mr. Felmet.
Here.
Councilmember Hamlet is expected but not yet present. Mr. Delory.
Here.
Ms. McGee.
Here.
Mr. Formicelli is expected but not yet present. Mr. Stern.
Here.
Mr. Bell.
Here.
Ms. Bowen.
Here.
You have a quorum. You may proceed.
Thank you. Now for the adequate notice statement. In accordance with New Jersey Statute 10:4-10, adequate notice of this meeting has been provided to a newspaper of record and has been posted here in City Hall. Please be advised this is a no smoking building. Fire exits are to my right or your left and in the back of the room. This is a scheduled meeting of the Planning Board. There may be other meetings currently running simultaneously with this meeting. If you're not here, although there is no one else here, for the Planning Board, your meeting may be upstairs or elsewhere in the building. This is a good time for the pledge. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. Let me grab my agenda. Let's see. Good evening, everybody. As you may see from the agenda, there's no public hearing on the calendar for this evening, so we have some resolutions to memorialize and some conversations to have among ourselves on some important matters. We can start with, actually, why don't you call the resolutions to be memorialized?
Sure. So first we have 2 Parkview Terrace. That's Michael and Susan Below. PB-23-271, Block 4707, Lot 23. Our eligible voting members are Chairman Zucker, Mr. Spur, Mr. Felmet, Councilmember Hamlet, Mr. Delory, Ms. McGee, and Ms. Bowen.
I've read this over. It does.
I apologize, Mr.
Sorry, go
Chairman,
ahead.
for interrupting you. I did have one change I caught.
Oh, good.
I just
Thank
wanted
you.
to alert the board before, at the appropriate time.
Well, actually, I was going to ask anybody if they, if they read it over and if they found any corrections or anything that doesn't reflect
My timing
our
is,
meeting, but your
little-
timing is
little-
very good, Mr. Warner.
I believe we're using the term in page 2, top of page 2, item number 3. Rather than building coverage, I believe we're using the term lot coverage in both spots there as opposed to building coverage. Nothing changes with respect to the magnitude of that deviation, and I think that is the only one I had on this one. I think I have 1 or 2 on the other.
Okay, thank you. I did not catch that, and nor any others. I think this very, very nicely reflects what we talked about and how the hearing went. But if anyone else has any other thoughts or comments, corrections? Hearing none?
Can we have a motion
So moved.
and a second?
Second?
Okay. Chairman Zucker,
Yes.
Mr. Spur,
Yes.
Mr. Felmet,
Yes.
Mr. Delory,
Yes.
Ms. McGee,
Yes.
Ms. Bowen.
Yes.
The motion carries. All right, so the next resolution we have is 30 Woodland Avenue. That's Jin Deng and Yulan Ying, PB-24-273, Block 1904, Lot 9. The eligible voting members are Chairman Zucker, Mr. Spur, Mr. Stern, Mr. Delory, Ms. McGee, and Ms. Bowen.
Mr. Warner, if you want to lead us off?
Appreciate that, Mr. Chairman, thank you. And we were trying to get confirmation of some information. You saw a couple of blanks in here to be as comprehensive as we always try to be. We got some of them, we didn't get all of them, but on page 2, number 8, the ordinance requires, the blank there should be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6th line down, the first blank, 24 feet is the requirement. They came up a bit short on that deviation. Otherwise, we have on that page, as you can see, 2 section numbers that we need to get confirmation of the the respective ordinance sections. The 24 feet, by the way, carries over to one other, page 5. You'll see there's a blank, that's that same 24-foot width. But the two ordinance sections and the address for the architect are still to be confirmed, as we had haven't gotten that confirmation yet from parties we sought it from. But it's up to the board, but given that there's no meeting in August, the next meeting is the end of September, I would, at least from the legal perspective, offer that you might wish to consider adopting it contingent on us getting that confirmation. The most important parts, the relief, the magnitude of the deviations, the conditions, not to say that the rest isn't important as well, but the most important parts, I think, of the resolution are already memorialized.
So what you're saying is these are very de minimis little corrections that, just looking up the section number essentially.
I would not disagree with that characterization, Mr. Chairman.
So if the board is comfortable, I'm certainly comfortable moving forward and approving the resolution subject to those minor corrections. Anyone have any other comments or observations they'd like to make about the resolution?
There's a little typo on the top of page 7. Milburn is misspelled, but
Top of page 7. Oh, Milburn. Oh, boy. Okay. Mulburn. Okay. Thank you.
sure.
We have 564 municipalities in the state of New Jersey. I do not believe Mulburn is one of them.
It
But I
might,
happen to
it
have
might be.
personal knowledge
It
of
might be.
Milburn.
I constantly encounter towns I have not visited or been to. Or heard of, right.
Oh, no. You never know, right? We have 5 Washingtons, as probably some of, or many of you know.
And at least 2 Springfields.
There you go.
Okay, so can we have a motion
So moved?
and a second? Okay. Chairman Zucker,
Yes.
Mr. Spur,
Yes.
Mr. Delory,
Yes.
Ms. McGee,
Yes.
Mr. Stern,
Yes.
Ms. Bowen.
Yes.
The
And we'll
motion
get that-
carries.
We'll get that information to Stephanie as soon as possible.
Mhm.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Next up, we have Mr. Weber, I think, is going to explain an extension, a request for an extension.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. James Weber of Alfonso and Weber, on behalf of the applicants, that's Shannon Mahaney, Liam and Susanna Carr, and Brenda and George Shepherd. The application for an extension is due to the fact that of the 3 subdivision deeds, 2 have been signed and recorded. The third one, due to international travel by the Carrs, could not make the deadline. As a result, they are back in New Jersey. We're going to have them sign the subdivision deed this Friday, and that will conclude this matter. But we need an extension in order to cover that period of time.
And just for the record, this is Planning Board File 22-263. I hadn't said that before you started. We're all good?
Mr. Chairman, if I may just weigh in on context,
Sure.
because we do have a resolution we drafted so that you could proceed with the extension. If it were to be granted, it is a 3rd extension, but I believe that indeed the 2nd extension may not expire until August 15th. However, so it's arguable whether they might actually need that 3rd extension or not, but I offered, it may be prudent nevertheless to grant it if you so determine it's warranted, and then if they record before August 15th, and we were correct in our math, that the last extension, the 2nd extension extended technically to the August date, because it extends not from when it's requested, but when the prior extension, the original timeframe, and then hence the subsequent extensions when they expire. So I think that's why, frankly, applicant may have thought they weren't going to make it when in fact they might, if you follow. But
If that's the case, Mr. Warner, and the recording happens next week and it falls under the 2nd extension, we just don't have to memorialize, or we can
Well, here's the thing, I think given that we, to be practical, given that we're not going to be meeting again, as I understand it, till the end of September, you may wish to grant the extension if they make it before the August 15th date, and we were correct in our calculations. I think the legal phrase is no harm, no foul.
Right.
If I could be heard with regard to that?
Sure.
The second extension actually included as a condition of approval. It also included as a condition of approval that it would expire July 7th, 2024.
It did, okay, interesting. I don't know why we had August. So all the more prudent for the, if the board so desires, to grant the extension.
No harm, no foul. Any other thoughts? Okay.
Can we have a motion
So moved?
and a second?
Second.
Okay.
And this will actually adopt the resolution that.
This is to adopt the resolution.
Memorializes this
Yes.
third extension.
Thank you, Mr.
Third
Moore.
time perhaps being the charm.
Okay. All right, so let's get a roll call vote. Chairman Zucker?
Yes.
I've never let one go.
Vice Chair Bolson Alvarez?
Yes.
Mr. Spur?
Yes.
Mr. Felmet?
Yes.
Mr. Delory,
Yes.
Ms. McGee?
Yes.
Mr. Stern?
Yes.
Mr. Bell?
Yes.
Ms. Bowen?
Yes.
The motion carries.
Mr. Chairman, I forgot to thank the board members for coming out in the middle of their summer to this hearing. It is appreciated, and I wanted to make that clear. Also, we have presented to Ms. Solios the proposed deed of subdivision for your consideration. I believe it's been reviewed by Mr. Warner's office, and it's ready for signature upon the adoption of the resolution. At that time, if Ms. Solios would permit, I'll appear tomorrow. I have to meet with Mr. Schrager, and I could pick up the signed deed at that point, and then finally this Friday, put this matter to bed.
Let's hope so. Sure.
And I appreciate the board's time again. Thanks for coming out.
Thank you. You're
Have a
welcome
good
to stay,
night.
Mr. Weber, too, if you'd like, for the duration of the meeting.
Uh,
Well, leave it to your discretion.
They wanted to-
Fascinating.
That's right. All of a sudden, lacking words.
right.
There we go.
Next up is the minutes from our last meeting. That would be June 24th. Hope everyone's had a chance to just look through them, and if anyone has any comments, corrections, clarifications they'd like to make, please offer them now. They seem to cover our conversation pretty accurately. All right, hearing no other thoughts or comments, I'll take the motion to approve the minutes.
So moved?
And a second?
Second?
Okay, we could do a voice vote, but I would like to exclude the members who were not present that evening, which were Vice Chair Bolson Alvarez, Mr. Formicelli, Mr. Bell, Councilmember Hamlet, and Mr. Felmet. All those in favor?
Yeah, aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries.
All right, thanks, folks. All right, that's the official business. Ms. Balson Alvarez, I believe you had some comments and,
Haven't I do?
to lead a conversation a little bit about the DRO.
Yeah.
I'm going to hand it
So-
over to you.
All right. So, as you know, there's a subcommittee of Mr. Spur and Mr. Formicelli. We've met a couple times. We've reached out to the public and come up with a very draft form of 10 ideas for discussion, for changes and edits to the DRO, the development regulations. This should be something that we do more often than we've been doing. We're hoping to do it at least annually. It's just a good practice. So, but I've handed out to all of you, hopefully you've made it around the table, just our top 10 for now for discussion purposes. We're hoping that you all will look at the topics and go to the master plan, familiar yourself again with the goals, and maybe have these in the back of your mind when you're looking at that, and then also look at the DRO and look at these topics, and then any others that you want to bring to the table, and we'll, at a future meeting, hopefully September, but if we have a million applications, maybe not. Yeah.
You have an extra copy?
Oh, here, you can have mine.
You want to keep yours? I can share with
You
you.
can take mine here, Jim.
Okay.
I'm a co-author of this here.
You're not
He doesn't
getting
take
mine,
candy
You
from
don't have
strangers.
No, I'm sorry. Yes, okay, okay. You're too organized. You filed it already.
I filed it already.
Yeah, okay.
It's never a fan of support of the governing body. It's kind of sitting quiet for a while.
Great, great, great. So the reexamination was 2016, 2017. And as you all know, a lot of citizens were involved in that, and the goals in the master plan document is the basis upon which we, write our DRO. So a lot of things that were aspirational in our master plan have gotten into our DRO, and a lot of things haven't. So we could go through the 10 items if you wanted just to introduce them, or you can take them home, read them, digest them, look at our documents, and we can talk about it at another time.
Good quick reference.
So, what do you want to do, Chair?
I'd like to go through them. We're
Okay.
here.
So the first one is possible update to the historic preservation ordinance. We have a historic preservation ordinance, and there's been a lot of discussion over decades, believe it or not, to improve it, give it a little more teeth perhaps. And the HPC is currently talking to DCS about this, and the city council as well. And my understanding from the HPC chair is that DCS has prepared a draft or is finishing up a draft, and they're working together on this effort. You all probably also know that the DRO has a section that's blank right now for an updated HPC ordinance. So it's been on the radar for a while. So something for us to discuss, and after we go through all of these and any others that you want to add, we'd make recommendations. We'd boil it down to what, our top 5, or maybe we do a dozen, who knows? And then we have to come up with language and then suggest it to city council. But anyway, so number 2 is one observation that comes up over and over is that the design guidelines, which we added to our DRO the last go-around, are missed very often by architects, developers, everybody. They seem to not use them, realize they're there. It's too bad because it's referred to in every single zone. This has to be compatible with the design guidelines. Look at Appendix A. Nobody looks at Appendix A. So our chair suggested, and the subcommittee agrees, that we should put them front and center and just say, all zones need to be compatible with these, and put them in the front so they don't get missed. So it seems like an easy fix, but we can discuss that. Number 3 is look at parameters for allowable roof decks in downtown. I remember many years ago, we approved the Elks Club. It's been great. Let's talk about that. Look at the DRO. Frankly, do not remember. I did a quick search of rooftop decks in the DRO. I didn't see anything. So something we should look at, because it's an interesting thing that we could do, and maybe not everybody needs to come for a variance for a rooftop deck.
Do you remember we did one at the building next to the Unitarian Church? It's like a couple doors down.
Unitarian Church? I don't remember that one.
Oh,
Yeah, okay.
I remember that one.
Where the carpet one, with the carpet stores, whatever, there's a small building there.
Yeah.
Professional office, and they asked for a roof deck, and I remember we did some, and they were, we winged it, I guess, because we really didn't have a.
Yeah.
And that was on that topic, there were 2 or 3 roof decks for varying size projects and varying zones within town that came before the zoning board in the past 2 or 3 years, for which there just isn't a set of parameters or guidelines to help understand what appropriate setbacks are,
Right.
some operational considerations, lighting, and I don't know,
And
Joe, you
sound.
may have experience, sound, right? Joe,
Yeah.
if you have experience in the municipalities with this, but I suspect there's some point of reference we could offer to help guide the zoning and planning boards in the very least to how to deal with these. If not, potentially codify a set that can allow approval as of right.
Right.
But that may be an ambitious first step.
Particularly in zones like downtown, business zones, the prod zones, they seem like obvious, easy.
And that's what a lot of towns are now building.
Right. And there's interesting deviation, there's a lot of creativity if it ever gets built across from the Volvo dealership, that Turconnell Park multifamily development has a dog run on the roof, where people can let their dog do their business on the roof. I don't think any of us would have anticipated that in the DRO, but the developers are creative, and absent our trying to be proactive, they'll continue to inject creativity, positive or negative, into their applications. So something to consider.
Cool. Any other comments on that? Okay. For stacked parking, there is quite a bit on pages 112 and 113 about stacked parking, but I thought maybe we should revisit it because it's an interesting topic. It's not gonna, maybe it's a moot point, maybe we've covered it, but I'd like to just revisit it. The subcommittee thought we could revisit it, maybe, so. Accessory dwelling units, back when we did the master plan, it came up. There are a lot of states, communities that do accessory dwelling units. We could discuss perhaps allowing them in existing properties, rentals free, whatever, certain residential zones, maybe B zones, but with larger lots. But I would think in existing, the subcommittee, and we discussed in existing structures, because I don't think people are gonna want a lot of new construction to make accessory dwelling units on a residential lot, but existing structures, carriage houses, outbuildings, that sort of thing. It might be a way to dip our toe into that. Anybody wanna?
The state is considering, but I think it's stuck in committee, but they are considering, probably not their first attempt, but to control zoning on a blanket statewide scale, which would be remarkable, but to allow for accessory dwelling units as a permitted use in all residential areas in all municipalities. Which is
If I
pretty
understand
bold.
correctly, it's to require it as a permitted.
Yes.
use, not just allow it.
To override.
So it would override,
local-
it would override local, but what about the setback rules and all that? Do we get to set that locally, or that'll be standardized?
Yeah, you get to set, to establish the setback requirements, building coverage requirements, but they would be allowed in all residential zones.
And I don't even think it had parking requirements. I don't even think it had parking requirements,
I think that's correct.
which is disturbing. Because you
Wow.
can imagine a
No,
neighborhood where
no.
people are moving in and how many cars they have, et cetera, so. So this is a topic, and certainly with affordable housing, there is some interest in people, in goodwill, deed restricting a carriage house to allow for that kind of stuff, so it's something to definitely talk about, allowing.
And inherent, I think, in accessory dwelling units is, if it's really small, it gives a variety of types of housing that may be less expensive, even in of themselves.
And that actually dovetails with one of the goals of the master plan, which specifically talks about that issue.
Right.
If I recall correctly, Bob, that there may be some, I hope I'm not conflating it, but there may be some minimum requirements, i.e., it's okay to be small, but not too small.
Right, that's right. That's true, that's true.
In the draft legislation, or in the pending, but it's not.
You want it, yeah.
enacted.
It's an interesting topic, and Californians had them forever, decades and decades. Anyway, so that's an interesting idea that we can talk about.
Might be belated.
That's right.
Double dormers, that's in the DRO. It was pretty well addressed, just came up in subcommittee. It's probably okay, but we can take a look at that. 7, in-kind replacement of existing AC condenser units. Before the DRO was redone, that was one of the first items we wanted to change. And it never got changed.
Well, it did get modified. They were not as of right, but the setback requirements were relaxed. But you could still have one that still doesn't meet the setback requirements, and you can't just replace it on the spot. You needed a variance.
In-kind replacement. Like, if you have an air conditioning unit that's in a location,
It's
it's
too
been there
close
for
to your
40
neighbor's line.
years, but it's not 25 feet from the rear yard setback, you have to get a variance.
Or within 7 feet of your neighbor's side yard, or whatever it was.
Yeah,
And,
yeah. So, we could look at it. Maybe it's fine, the way it was modified, or maybe it could be better.
No, it could be, you could go further, I bet.
Yeah, having just gone through it, I would love to change that. But maybe I should not be
Having
the
no
one to
setback.
lead that conversation. Anyway, in the master plan also, like Joe mentioned, there's discussion of 55 and older housing. I don't think there's anything in the DRO currently that encourages that or requires that. There's nothing. So again, looking at our master plan and looking at our DRO, what do we want to encourage and consider? Did you want to say something about that?
No, well, with the new affordable housing regulations, the percentage of units that can be set aside for, I think it's age 62 and above,
It is, yes.
has been increased. So that would
Okay.
adjust the number a little bit, that could work well.
So is that to say that if we were coming up with an affordable housing plan, we can allocate, we can meet our goal and also allocate a certain number to age 62 and older?
Yes, it used to be at 25%, and with the new regulations, it's going to 30%.
Oh,
Yeah, you get, is that that's a half extra credit?
Yeah.
Some are a full extra credit, some are a half extra credit. Extra credit sounds like back in school, right?
I understand, but you don't get as much credit for
But
doing
yeah,
senior.
but you could get for the seniors up to 30%, you can get a half bonus credit on top of the one credit for the unit. But also,
Oh.
all the bonuses are subject to caps as well. So it's, to say it's a numbers game perhaps.
Yeah,
is
you
an
can't
understatement.
bonus yourself out of your requirement completely, yeah.
That's right, that's right. You owe us, yes.
You owe us, yeah.
Well, perhaps, Joe and Steve, you have some information you could send to us through Stephanie about, to think further about this idea and maybe how to put in the DRO. Because, we don't have anything in there now.
Do we have any age restricted in town?
I don't think that's in the
Other than
DRO, and I
senior
don't think anybody
housing.
volunteered, so I
Other
would
than,
say,
other than
yeah.
senior housing,
Yeah,
right?
other than the housing authority.
The
I don't
housing
believe
authority.
So, no.
Right.
I mean, I always feel like there's a demand in town for people who want to downsize and stay in town. I mean, I would just think,
Yeah.
Very much so.
Yeah, I mean, it just,
Yeah.
that's
And I do think
a
it's
worthy
not
goal. yeah.
onerous in this particular town. I don't think that, and in a lot of towns, I don't think it's an onerous request to expect to have a percentage of folks in residential, multifamily to be age restricted. It makes for a population that's if your population's only childbearing years, people that are, it makes for a strange population dynamic. So it's in the master plan for a reason, and it's something that we should consider looking at.
You couldn't guarantee Summit seniors if they were to be deed restricted due to how you select residents.
Right, 'cause
If they
it's-
were affordable housing, but you could still create restrictive housing by age.
Right.
That isn't necessarily deed
It
restricted.
could be affordable, or it could be just market rate.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, yeah. Threw in 2 recommendations, because we can also, as a board, recommend things to city council. Again, on the age restricted, maybe recommending to the city council that the Broad Street project includes some age-restricted housing. Again, it seems like a good way to keep our population diverse on an age perspective, from an age perspective. And then the last one, a long time ago, I looked into, because as you all know probably, we have capital improvements that come, like an addition on a school. They'll come and they'll do a beautiful presentation, a courtesy review, and it's done. I mean, it is designed, it's done, and that's all great. And they can choose to take any recommendations we may have, but typically it's too late for that by the time we see it, and nothing
We
is.
actually just look at the turf field on the lower field, we spent 4 hours there, and 8 AM the next morning, they had 50 bulldozers on site.
yeah,
I'm assuming
That was called
everything-
courtesy review.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. So, many years
Give you the
ago,
courtesy of waiting with the bulldozers.
and this is where Joe, get ready, putting you on the spot. I started Googling
Suggest them.
what other towns do and whether they review capital improvements, because I couldn't believe millions and millions of dollars are basically not reviewed at all. You know, we're not rocket scientists here, but, you know, I think it's a good practice to have some review. We know our DRO, we know what our master plan says. We kind of have an idea of what our citizens kind of want to see here and expect here, and, you know, have it be consistent. So I found 10 that appeared to have a capital
Yes.
improvement review.
The-
Joe?
The municipal land use law gives the planning board the right to do capital improvement reviews. Most
Check.
municipalities.
Well,
avail themselves
Mr.
of
Warner.
that.
Joe, do you want to?
Sorry, say that again.
Do you want to explain exactly the parameters of that, right?
You might want to pull your mic up, because I don't know if folks at home can
It
hear
might
you.
be beneficial, like I'm gonna put together a memo on this age-restricted issue. I'll put something together for the full board to read.
Okay.
I mean, I think, and, you know, an example obviously would be like the firehouse that went up without, you know, it's a pretty big project.
Mhm.
And it didn't, you know, it's not something we had any say about. And if you're saying that there's a possibility that projects like that can be reviewed by us,
Yeah.
we would like to know the parameters.
And when we got that courtesy review, the architects for that building agreed to multiple conditions we requested that weren't actually substantive, like the footprint was the same, it was just a few suggestions to be more compatible, to have, you know, just certain things. And it probably would have saved them some money as well. And they said, oh, yes, oh, yes, oh, yes.
Nothing?
So there's no reason for them to do it, and maybe they meant it, and they seemed very earnestly wanting to do that, but I think that, again, it was too far down the road, and it was hard to backpedal at that point.
That's typically what happens with the courtesy review. They say thank you, and as you said, the next morning they're out there digging.
Or is there, if we can't do that, is there a way to make them come earlier?
Well, I think if
Before
there's a
we
real
actually
review,
dig.
they'll
There
have to
is.
come earlier.
There is, and that's what I'm gonna,
Yeah.
I don't have all the details in front of me, so I just wanna put it together in a memo form so everybody will have all the right
They need to come not at
information.
construction times,
Yeah,
but
not
a
the
design
day before they're about
development.
to, like, break ground.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, it behooves them, they could come with that, but we would have a real review and they'd have to redesign. So that, I would think they'd just by default would come at design development, not at construction time.
So,
Um,
thank you.
And there are a couple of others. I reached out to some architects who have to deal with our DRO all the time. What's your most annoying thing in our DRO, you know, was the question, just to see if there is something that just doesn't make sense, or, you know, and I'm waiting for, they both responded, but they're, you know, they're working on their list. So that's a good thing, and I think Steve's reached out to the Environmental Commission, who always have great ideas, and I'm in touch with HPC, and we should probably reach out to some other boards too.
I mean, is there any law that's like taken over the last, I know the reexamination was 16. Since then, a consistent theme of variances that we approved that maybe we should look at codifying?
I mean, in the zoning board annual report, Stephanie does the hard work of compiling all of the approvals or disapprovals and the variances that were included in them. So that would be something we could look at as well.
Right.
Do you want to resend that? Should we just resend that to everybody?
Sure.
And that's an important part of the process, as everybody knows.
Because you
I
will see patterns.
like to talk about that. The zoning board is tasked with that obligation at least once annually. I've rarely, if ever, seen it done more than once annually, but it must be done once, at least once annually, because the zoning board is the board that sees, for the most
Yeah.
part, the bulk of the variances where particularly there may be variances that could be eliminated or if the ordinance is modified. And that's why the obligation is the zoning board to get the report back to the governing body and the planning board as the legislative bodies, if you will, to then take that information and decide whether they're going to make amendments to the ordinances, et cetera. So it's built into the MLUL, and it's a good way of circling back around. So, and we got a great annual report from the Zoning Board of Adjustment.
I can't take credit for any more, but, Paul, I would just make note that the 10 items that Jennifer had surfaced, and thank you for typing this out, by the way. My notes are way messier and disorganized, so thank you for doing this. It reflects already a review of the zoning board's annual report, where we sought to surface not just frequent requests for variance relief, but those with significant ambiguity and a likelihood to reappear. Stacked parking and roof decks are examples of that. Little things like the double dormer, relatively little things like the double dormers and the in-kind AC replacement are the low-hanging fruit, kind of the quick fixes. And I would imagine we're gonna come out of this with probably 5 things, something big and meaty that we won't touch until our children and grandchildren are sitting up on this dais, like ADUs, or 55 plus. But then there's gotta be every year 2 or 3 little things we can pick off, and some things we get a little more ambitious around, maybe HPC, while Jennifer's here leading the charge, so we'll see.
HPC has been in the works since the 80s.
Yeah.
Are you
Well,
saying that it's historic at this point?
Almost. Usually the general
Mike's
sums
off.
50 years. Yeah.
The,
The
well,
70s
and as you
count.
said, the ADUs may be forced on us anyway, or at least imposed. We'll see. Thank you so much for putting that together.
Yeah, the one other thing that I forgot to mention is that Tom Behrens, who was very involved in rewriting helping us write and wrote the DRO with Krista, he has a list too of things that he's seen over and over and things that he thought maybe should have been tweaked. So he's polishing that off, and he's going to give it to the subcommittee, and we'll share whatever he brings to us as well.
Okay, thank you very much. Do we have any other comment on cross-acceptance? Is there anything else come up on that? I don't think so.
I actually thought there was an August meeting, which that was a separate thing.
Yeah, well, yep, that is the case. So, just if no one's aware, and I know our planner came and spoke about it, but cross-acceptance is a process by which the state releases a plan, and then the county runs a process by which and Joe, tell me if I'm wrong, municipalities within that county provide feedback on how their local plans align with the county and the county with the state. So it's a reconciliation of planning in the region. And there's a template. We as Summit wanted to participate in this, as it was a wish by council. And so you had to submit a resolution to participate in this. That we're waiting on the state to put the plan out. They're supposed to update it every 3 years, and it hasn't been done in 21, I believe.
I believe that number is correct.
But, so, that being said, there is a series of questions. Joe Burgess's firm did a good job of doing a draft, but there are questions like, what are people's top 3
Right.
design goals?
Well, the
is one of
county
them.
asked for that. It's a different process than what occurred a number of years ago. It used to be that each municipality would have direct contact with the state plan organization. Well, now it's the county that does the negotiation on all the municipalities in the county's behalf. So we have to send our material to the county, and then they in turn will talk to the state. The state was supposed to get a draft back in March, and once a month on that date, like March 15th, say, we get an email that says, we're still working on it.
But they're not 21 years behind yet.
Well, they're past 21 weeks, so. But one of the things they do want to know is, of your goals and objectives, what are the 3 most important ones? Why they picked 3 and not 5 or 7 or whatever, I don't know. But they asked for 3, and that's one of the reasons why I handed out that memo. We don't need to have an answer tonight, but you should look at that if you have the document itself, because with each of the sub paragraphs, there's a whole page in the master plan that writes about that goal. And you should take a look at that, and then the next time we get together, we can really hone in to identify, of these 6 broad goals, what are the ones that we really want to emphasize to the county.
And then one of the things that is, I believe, required is that there be public input.
Yes.
And it was decided that the planning board, that it has the authority to deliver the master plan, would have a portion of one of its meetings in which we would invite the public to provide input in addition to what the planning board thought could be those goals. So that would include putting out a little packet with some of the questions that we would be seeking the public to provide for us at a meeting.
So let's talk about that for a second. That
Yeah.
sounds very interesting. If we get, let's just say we're lucky enough by the next meeting to get the template, to get guidelines?
Well, we have,
We have
the
the
template and the guidelines are available, it's just the state hasn't released its plan. And
Well,
some of
okay,
the
the state
template
plan.
questions say, of the plan, what are your thoughts on blank? Well, we can't comment on it because we don't have the plan. But there are questions that that are broad, that Joe's talking about, that we do want to hear from the public on. So in addition to the planning board having a conversation about these topics as reflective of the master plan, that there would be a portion of a meeting where the public would be invited to come forward and just provide comment on their thoughts and ideas.
In addition to perhaps soliciting input via email, I mean, this isn't something that's a required step within the MLUL that we undertake, but I think what Matt and others, and I've certainly discussed, is offering a number of different forms for the public to input on this process, at least on broad policy matters, is desirable. The August meeting is definitionally the worst meeting of the year.
No,
to
for
solicit
sure,
Public
for sure,
meeting,
yeah.
public input, but the risk we run is, I believe, was it September 5th or 8th is the.
The county put out a
County
loose, the county's
date?
meeting on September 5th in Cranford, but without the state plan, I can't imagine that
Yeah.
happening, and it had already been delayed since June. So I feel like planning for the September meeting would probably still provide us with
Yeah.
enough time.
That's just the potential risk we run, if not holding it in August, is potentially the state gets its act together during the July to August timeframe, and we miss that kind of step before it, but.
So after public input, we would then be boiling down our top priorities to give them, you know?
Yeah, in the form of a template. We're also submitting through Joe's office all of our planning documents through the years, everything to sort of submit that they had requested.
I would suggest we just shoot for the September meeting, and just,
Yeah, I mean, I don't.
you're right, there's a risk, I guess, but,
Yeah,
May be able to open the public email, solicitation of input via email prior to that, in case for whatever reason we do miss that window, but it's doubtful that the county or the state's gonna spend their Labor Day holiday preparing for that September 5th meeting.
So the communication would be something like explaining just loosely what cross acceptance is, and then having a call to either email or show up at a specific meeting to answer 2 or 3 questions if anyone has opinions or wants to share on that. Collect that information, have a conversation as a board, and then that would help Joe's office synthesize an answer that could be put in the template that would then go to the
Good.
county.
And that's a good time frame, because
Joe,
it
do you-
gives us time to
looks
look
like
over.
Joe's trying to say something. Dying to say something. Joe?
Joe, were you trying to say something?
No, at the end of that conversation, I do have one thing to point out, and maybe it's time it now. The 2016 document is a master plan reexamination report. And for those that attended that Saturday morning work session, if you recall, we discussed the fact that a reexamination report technically is not your master plan. Now, I know this municipality has always perceived it as the master plan and has always talked about it as such. And that's why I summarized the goals from this document. And maybe the question is to you, Steve. The last time they did a master plan, a land use plan update, was, I believe, in 2006. Now, some of the goals and objectives set forth in this,
But we're good with the 10-year because we're.
oh, no, there's no problem with the time frame.
Okay.
It's whether
Yeah,
we can use this as the new master plan, even though it's entitled a REX. Or do we really
Joe
have to go
has shared
back?
that it actually is so comprehensive that it's really a master
And,
plan.
yeah,
Yeah.
and you can have reexaminations that are, in essence, not restated master plans, but that satisfy the requirements for a quote-unquote full-blown master plan. So can you do it after the fact?
Well, that's what we talked about at that Saturday morning
Well, yeah,
session.
Steve hesitated on it. I mean, for us to go back and say, well, we really did a master plan, with all that effort, why can't we call it that? I don't know.
Yeah, I can look into that.
I just don't want to see the municipality caught short during the cross-acceptance process, and that's why I bring it up.
2006 was the last quote-unquote full-blown?
Yeah.
But I thought we said in the reexamination, I thought we had language in there effectively calling it a restated or amended master.
I don't recall
And
seeing
again,
it.
preceded, my involvement here in the city, but I thought I recall seeing that.
Well, it's got goals and objectives clearly spelled out.
Has all the elements.
It doesn't have all the elements that are spelled out in the MOUL, though, for a master plan, for a land use plan. That's the problem.
Does it have the required?
No, it does
Yeah,
not have all
it's
of the
missing the
required
required, yeah.
components.
Doesn't that kind of decide its fate?
That's why I raised it back in, whenever
Yeah.
we met on
Okay.
a Saturday session.
What is the requirements to bring that to the next level?
Well, some of the information is demographic information. Some of that information is the environmental information. Now, we have all of that in the housing element and fair share plan. So it's a simple matter of lifting that from that document and attaching it to this.
Well, what do
Which
you?
I
what
thought
do you
it
cons-
was, once you finish the fair share housing. I thought it was supposed to be part of that.
Is it incorporated?
I thought it, because it was one of the elements, but it never,
Well,
anyway.
let's put it this way, what we would say to the county and then the state is that by virtue of the fact that this was in 2016 and the housing element and fair share plan containing all that other information was adopted in 2019 or 20, it effectively has to be read as one document, because master plans can consist of multiple elements. And Steve is furiously looking at something. But I think that's the way to get around it, so you don't spend money needlessly to put these documents together as one piece.
I mean, we could talk about this more too, because it's possible that if the procedures that are required for adopting a a master plan were abided by in full, whereas with the master plan reexamination report, you don't require the same procedures. If you abided by those procedures back in 2016, then you may be able to effectively treat it as a master plan, even if it doesn't.
Why
say
don't I
it in
do a
the
little
title.
more looking into, and then you can
Yeah.
do the same, and then we can talk later.
I
in
think
the
that's
week.
very much worth investigating.
Yeah.
Maybe they should
Yeah, you guys can circle back and,
Okay.
advise us. Thanks.
thank you.
We will do that.
There was one other thing we didn't have on the agenda, which was periodic training.
Yes.
We talked a little bit to Tom about it, and we've all talked about it before, and the chair and I thought that we would like to do periodic training, talk about the DRO, talk about case studies, talk about things like that in closed-door session, because it's not about specific applications that are for the public to see. It's just, so we're comfortable asking the dumb questions and, learning, so.
Wait, I'm sorry, I missed a little bit. What would be in closed session?
Training.
Training,
It can't be a closed session.
Yeah.
But like we had Saturday, that Saturday morning, it was open to the public. I think one or two non-board members were there. And we had a very good conversation about a lot of different issues, I thought.
And I've done many of those on Saturday mornings or whenever. Yeah, that would not fall within one of, although I'm giving attorney-client privilege to advice right now, but, we could, that might not fall within one of the 7 exceptions to the Open
I mean, does it
Public
have to be,
Meetings Act.
does a training session have to be in a televised room here, or it just has to be open to the public?
Just has to be open to the
Noticed.
public.
Fine.
Notice and
I
open.
think that would be better.
Fine,
I
that's
do
fine.
think that some of the questions that may have come up last time we did the training, it was being filmed. I don't know why it was being filmed, so very few questions. I think it's inhibiting. I think people need to feel comfortable, and sure, open to the public if it must be, but I don't think it should be on the television. I don't think it needs to be filmed.
that's
I
up to
need
you.
people to feel comfortable learning,
The minimum requirement is that minutes, as Stephanie and Matt and everybody will tell you, the minutes be taken, but,
Well, it has to be noticed. If
well,
we
I'm
get-
saying
if we
in
get
addition to
together.
being noticed and
Yeah.
open, yeah, to the
But
public.
I think it's more semantics. I think closed session is a very specific process by which you
Right.
can only, with closed doors, discuss 7 specific things, but
Right.
meaning just more private. The reason that had been filled is there were people that weren't going to be able to attend, and it took time to get Joe and a group of people in the room that other future council members and planning board members could at least see the content. But yes, in the future, it wouldn't have to be filmed.
I don't think so.
But those were good, just to at least now we have them archivally, so somebody could watch them and get
Yeah.
the same education.
Right.
But, yeah,
Yeah.
I think that, Jennifer and I both agree, it's going through some case studies and seeing how we would actually take some of these documents and apply them is really helpful to all of us, because that's really what we're being asked to do on a regular basis. And it's not second nature.
Well, whenever you're ready, I assume we don't want to do that during August. So we could talk about
Probably
a date
not,
in
yeah.
September or early
Yeah,
October.
yeah, we'll look for a September date.
I'm thinking quarterly, we're very interested in doing that.
That's fine.
And as stated, we will comply fully with the law.
We will comply
in
fully
how
with the
we-
law.
Of course, we'll
Thank you,
comply
Mr.
with the
Warner.
law. Didn't realize, unless it was an application, that it had to be noticed and all of that. So that's good to know.
When there's more than 3 of us or 4 of us in a room, that's the point. Yeah, no problem. All right, well, thank you. Any other items for anybody on the agenda?
I can give an update from the shade tree council,
Please.
as exciting as trees are. But they're actually, I guess, so the forester, the committee began and have been working on updating our ordinance for tree protection dating back to '22. And it was brought for a hearing at city council on June 24th. And I believe it was adopted at the following meeting in early July. That basically, it tightened up some of the requirements around the cutting of trees and the disposal of trees and the permitting of trees, and the oversight and the requirements now are at a diameter of 12 inches instead of 16. There's a ratio of multiple tree replacements based on the diameter as opposed to the 1-to-1 tree replacement that was in the previous agreement. There are some hazardous trees that have been exempted from fees or being required to be replaced. They've modernized some of the violations and penalties from the previous requirements, and to address repeat and overt violators. They also added some prohibited species from being planted in town, and streamlined the verbiage to allow for timely and environmental changes in the industry without requiring the ordinance to be updated for each incident. So our tree requirements have thus been updated.
Do we know if the DEP had approved this and accordingly it's in effect?
So
Stealing your thunder.
during the hearing, the head of the DEP was not there, but she offered a statement of support.
So DEP approved the, okay, good.
They were in favor of it. I don't know if they approved it technically.
I would imagine if they are in favor of it, they've either formally approved it or will. That's the key now with the, these MS4 permit requirements, the stormwater regs. All municipalities, tree protection, removal, and replacement, protection, removal, replacement ordinances either have to be approved by DEP or you have to use the model. It's another one of those DEP model ordinances. The model ordinance is good, of course, with DEP, or you have to have your ordinance approved by DEP, or if not, modify it accordingly.
This was a model situation, I believe, that they took and specified.
And it was the July, I think it got codified in July
Yeah,
after the
that's
June
it, yep.
24th meeting.
Paul, just a quick question. How do you prohibit a tree?
We need prohibited tree.
Well, the second to last thing you said was preventing certain.
Well, there's some species that they just don't want in town, like.
But how would they know?
So technically, there's, the ordinance requires if trees are gonna be planted or removed, you have to get approval as to what trees you're going to replace them with. And they're not gonna allow certain species because whether it's the ones that get infested with beetles or other issues that the forester has with them, he would not
Another
So if you're
example
putting in
is
a new
trees
tree,
that
you
are
can
known
put in
to
any tree.
break in the snow. Like they just don't
No, just
hold
what I'm
up.
wondering, is this only when you're replacing a tree, or is this just in general?
The permitting process is when you go to cut down a tree that exists within a certain diameter and it requires a replacement, that has to be approved, to Paul's point. But I don't think anyone is out looking for who's planning things,
Yeah, I just
so.
thought it was sort of strange.
So yes, people can, this is like if you intend to cut a tree
Right.
or do that. then-
Right, so
then
it's
it
only limited
addresses
times, then you'd actually be checking the list.
that. Yeah.
Yeah. Paul, thank you for that report, actually. Appreciate it.
I see on here that the Mount Laurel Subcommittee is on here. I don't mind just sharing a quick update on
Please
that,
do.
if that's okay. So, council formed the Mount Laurel Subcommittee, which is a confidential group to address the closing of round 3 of the affordable housing round, and then to address round 4. Steve Spur sits on that. There's a zoning board member, members of council, the planner, a number of professionals, affordable housing attorney. And we've met about 4.5, 5 times, but we had a lot that happened, like I said, between new laws and et cetera. One of the things that will be coming up at a future meeting is the description of a very specific process by which, when developers approach the city, what they will go through. There are a lot of ways you can approach the city, and a lot of times what developers will do will say, well, I met with the selected official and they love my idea, even though they didn't say it, or they'll meet with someone privately and say, well, I met with the chair of the planning board and he said or she said. So we're definitely encouraging that anyone that's approached by a developer, that it may have an affordable housing component, that they just reach out to me or just refer that person to me. And then a smaller group of that will meet with the individual and gain information. The Mount Laurel Subcommittee does not make any decisions. It only makes recommendations. So they'll just do all the legwork to then make a recommendation to Common Council about how to proceed. But we probably will be seeing a lot of developers come out of the woodwork in very short time, because there is a window in which you can challenge, and not all the rules are set. So now is the time when people are knocking on doors and wanting to perhaps describe the city in ill
It's a good
form.
proactive and rather straightforward process, so that developers can say they had access to a consistent, transparent, and valuable process, frankly, to help orient themselves to what the municipality may find to be appropriate development, with particular reference to affordable housing inclusions. And what Matt had just suggested is coming to the conclusion of the round 3 obligations and now soon facing round 4. We're seeing an upswell of interest in developers to want to seize on that opportunity. And I think in this case, Summit will not be caught flat-footed, but we'll be in a position to really streamline that process, provide value to the developers, but be really a consistent and fairly objective arbiter of what are the options that developers have to go forward. Not at all removing their ability to seek variance approval, not at all not at all removing the governing body's ability to provide for overlay zone provisions, or, God forbid, a developer pursuing something as a right. But I think it's a really very straightforward, informative process, and I would imagine a model for other municipalities to adopt, frankly, moving forward.
Joe?
That seems like something should be handled in a compliance point of view, too. That you should know, absolutely, you get a phone call. Thank you so much, call Matt.
And I think as Matt suggested, right, there's an education for all the different stakeholders, that may represent the municipality in a variety of different formats: attorneys, planners, engineers, full-time employees, elected officials, to be kind of funneling folks into one particular path. And it's, if anything, will just ensure a fair process for everyone, and really, avoid a lot of back and forth, a lot of confusion, and I would argue, sorry, Steve, hopefully a lot of litigation we'd like to avoid as well.
That's all about avoiding litigation.
Right.
That's the first thing.
So it's good, very proactive, very thoughtful. I'm sure it'll be refined over time, but it's a real positive step forward. So, thank you, Matt.
Anything else on that topic? I just have one more thing to add.
If we're having one.
Anything else on the Mount Laurel? Does anybody? Okay, and then the other thing is, the master plan is due in 2026. We're heading into 2025, and I know council is very eager to begin that process. I think between Broad Street West and how much has changed in the landscape and how quickly things will change, that a master plan would probably be a very good idea, and to not wait until 2026. we start budgeting the 2025 year in August, so right around the corner. So we may want to start to think about, and I know council is interested, and Councilwoman Hamlet maybe speak further on in September about this, but really budgeting and being thoughtful about beginning the process in 2025 of the board going through a master plan process.
Yep.
It
That
took
makes
us at
sense.
least a year to do just the
Yes,
reads.
it'll take, yeah.
Yeah, so
it'll take that time.
they're, the council's feeling, well, at least certain members of council, I'm not speaking for council, I'm not speaking for every council person, but this council does like to be prepared. They really want to make sure they are being timely and responsive. So the good thing is they want to get ahead of that and not start in '26. So
That makes
start to
sense.
think about that as a process that we would go through in '25.
Joe, do you have any comments on that?
Yes,
Use my firm.
Please.
I'll second that motion.
Yes.
No, the reality is you have until November of '26, because the REAX is dated in November 6th of 2016. You've got to figure you're going to spend at least a full year. I know there's a lot of very interested people on this board, on the council, on the public, so it's going to be an extended process. And the sooner you can start with the background information, the better off you'll be. Fortunately, because of the timing of the housing element and fair share plan, a lot of the information on development patterns, the vacant land inventory, all the demographic information will all be done sooner rather than later, because that's the information we've always talked about getting out of the way for the housing plan.
And that information, at least as of now, by law, will be due June 30th of this, 2025.
Yes. And what I had suggested as part of the housing plan is let's do that now to get that out of the way so we can really spend all our time focusing on how we're going to implement whatever our housing need number will be. That number, technically, theoretically at least, is due to be published October 20th. So you can see that, the timing is good for all of this. Just so you understand, I know everybody thinks that the fourth round begins July 1 of '25, but the reality is there's certain information that is now due in mid-September of '24. So the process is being accelerated. So.
And to some degree, as I've mentioned before, front-ended, so to speak, prepackaged almost. Well, that might be strong. Front-end.
Okay.
So master plan, begin a conversation in '24 to budget for activity in '25 so that we go into '26 kind of full and ready.
That makes sense.
I just want to commend the subcommittee on these 10 goals and ideas, and say thank you. They're all very, very good, with some greater specificity than others. I particularly like the second one, as was described, if people are ignoring the design
gosh.
guidelines, integrating them better than as an appendix. And as we're sitting here, I was rereading them as well as other things. And also the bottom line on the 11th point, if you will.
Yeah. Homework.
If planning
Homework,
board
everybody.
members do have suggestions, as was said, the next meeting isn't for a couple of months. Is there a way in the interim, by email or otherwise, we could get in touch with?
Yeah, sure. Feel free to email.
Rather than extend this meeting till.
Yeah. Yeah, I expect this to double this
Yeah.
list, at least, triple, because there's so much more that we could
All right.
consider
So I'm
discussing.
just going to ask one question. It's not a specific comment. I mean, I could talk about the size of the lot you need for beekeeping, for example, as a specific thing.
Right.
I won't. A general question is, in any ordinance, how to put it politely, the fatal flaw is what is recommended and what is required.
Right.
And I'm sure that the subcommittee has grappled with that, because some of the wonderful text is just very, very advisory, and some of it is binding. And that might be a general topic of discussion at some
Right,
meeting.
right. I purposefully made this list about our discussion.
Yeah.
Not text for any proposed text
Yeah,
for the
no,
DRA.
but it might lead to that.
To try to be very open in the way I said anything, because I didn't want to like impose my view, except for the AC unit maybe. This is gotta go. And putting, I think that it's an easy fix with regard to just the technically moving the design guidelines within the document. That doesn't seem like a big topic for discussion, it seems pretty simple. But yeah, everything else I tried to make it very open-ended, and then, once we prioritize, we add to the list and then talk about it and prioritize, then the subcommittee, I presume, will sit with Steve and then try and hash out language, which we will then all review on those topics we choose to tackle.
But when you say hash out language, in addition, you're talking about deciding what.
Proposed language for city council.
What we can legally make required versus recommended. Because that's really where the, the devil's in that detail.
Yeah, and, yeah, you can't enforce recommended, really.
And with due respect to the master plan, which is an exciting, inclusive process, what have you, this is where the rubber hits the road, the DRO. So spending time and prioritizing them according to the degree of public input we may want to solicit and the degree of change we may want to implement is appropriate. Some of this stuff is very low-hanging fruit, easy to make in year. Others, we may want to align with the master plan discussions, the 55 and over set-asides, for example. But, I mean, this is the very substantial point of reference for folks, seeking permits, seeking variance relief, to understand actually how you apply the policy prerogatives of the municipality.
What is the process when we go through this, if we do have 1 or 5 or 10 things that we'd like to implement? How does that actually happen?
We have to decide what well, maybe I should let the professionals say.
Well, you're talking about the list that Jennifer handed out?
Yeah, for the
Okay.
DRO.
That could be done through a subcommittee, but at some point, the way the municipal land use law is worded, either the governing body could take the lead from the subcommittee, or the governing body could direct this board to take the lead. That is typically the way it's done, because the governing body doesn't want to get into the weeds on ordinances. So let's assume that the planning board, the full planning board in the end, will be the one analyzing, the recommendations and then making recommendations to the governing body. Once the governing body gets it, they'll take a look at it, they introduce the ordinance, and technically they have to then kick it back to this planning board for what's called a consistency review, where the planning board reviews the regulations and determines whether it's consistent or not with the master plan. And they make the recommendation back to the governing body.
Not
It's not inconsistent.
Theoretically, they might change a word or two, and
Yeah.
or they might change something, and
Yeah,
then we
the-
have to say it's consistent, and then it becomes an ordinance.
The way the statute is worded, it's a double negative.
Right.
So you're not
And that was-
inconsistent.
And then, of course, the governing body can, on second reading after public hearing at the governing body level, proceed with adopting the ordinance, if that's the will. So, yeah, we can do everything right up to the recommendation to the governing body. That's where we hand it off, but for that short return for the master plan consistency review. Yeah.
And just to add one little thing. So we're talking about the big picture, let's come up with 20 things and talk about them, and then, whatever rises to the top that we really want to send up to city council, the subcommittee probably would work with Steve to try and get the language right, to say what we really mean, because you want it to be specifically
And Joe.
correct for the DRO, and Joe, of course, both of them. And then we'd have you all bless it or tweak it, whatever, with our professionals, and then we'd send it.
Probably
Then they'd send it back.
importantly too in this is starting to establish the timeline we would want to undertake on an annual basis. Because I think we've done this on an ad hoc basis in prior years, but we don't know when we need to deliver, the top 10 list, when we need to come back with the list of 5.
I started to put a schedule in, and I was like, the next meeting's August, and I don't even know if we're having it, so I took that out.
But it'd be great to establish that cadence,
Yeah.
and then
I
we'll
would-
know how big a bite we can take in future years as well, and what maybe needs to be kind of carried on as a multi-year effort. So.
Personally, I'm hoping that we have gone through, added to the list, then again, shrunk the list, discussed it, and done the language and everything well before the end of the year, so city council could then approve it by the end of the year. That's what I wanted to say, but I didn't, because I didn't know if it was realistic or not. But that's
Also-
what I think would be realistic if we had tackled it, for a short period of time, every meeting or every other meeting.
Plus, the zoning board report comes out, which is a tickler to kind of tell the planning board, hey, we did a year of these. You're starting to review your
One of the last
DRO.
things I did with the zoning board report before I left was we used to publish it at the end of the year. Now we try to publish it at the close of the first quarter. So if we have that as a point of reference for this process, say by the end of the second quarter, we could have a short list available and use the back half of the year to put forward the specific recommendations for revision.
It's well overdue.
Let's do it, Jennifer.
Well overdue. I remember when we finished it, several of us already had a list. We didn't do that.
For next time, yeah.
Yeah.
We already had a list for next time, yeah.
Yeah, and I can't wait to see what Tom's list is, because he's intimately aware of it.
He has a pretty decent-sized list.
Yeah,
That's the
so
top 100.
That'll get forwarded to everybody too to check out, and we'll see what.
What's good about the process and the scheduling of it all, is you're going to be amending the ordinance at the same time you're doing this master plan discussion. What we like to do with our master plan is, on the more controversial issues, explain in some detail why these regulations are in the good, why you've made the decisions you have, because that will then help Steve if he's ever in court, because the courts always say, well, where in the master plan does it support
Yes.
these regulations?
Yeah.
And the more detail you can provide, and even in terms of goals and objectives, what we like to do is identify the goal, and then we would have an accompanying policy statement explaining the goal, because that again helps Steve if he's ever in court on the issue.
If an ordinance is challenged, there's something called the 4 Riggs factors for the Riggs case. And the first is substantial consistency with the master plan, so you want to have that. And that's why the master plan is by definition broader, general, with objectives and goals. And that's, as you say, Steve, accurately, the rubber meets the road when you get to the DRO, the actual zoning ordinances, land development ordinances. But that master plan is very important. We are the gatekeepers of the master plan, I always like to say. So is the planning board. That's important because it has to be well-grounded, the ordinances in that master plan, or else, yes, then I have a tougher time of successfully defending an unwarranted challenge to our ordinances.
We want you to have all the tools you need.
I'll take it.
Well, thank you, folks.
Anything else?
Does anybody have anything else?
Just real quick, my last day with the city is August 8th, actually. Yes, so this is my last meeting with you all. Yes, unto the great blue yonder. It is time. I've been with the city for 7 years, but I think I've served with many of you through the pandemic and through Primrose, which I think was equally
Whoa,
as
that's
Equally
another one.
as traumatic.
Parking for schools, for daycares, that's another
Primrose
one
broke
we
you,
have
man.
to put on there.
Definitely, after Primrose, I was never the same. No, but I just want to thank everybody for having me, and I really enjoyed
kidding?
service. And
Oh,
so the council will be
we'll miss
working on a
you.
replacement, but thank
And you
you.
didn't just serve with 7 years, you served with 7 years with distinction.
Oh, my God, your
Uh,
grace.
and,
Thank you.
More than a pleasure to work
Oh,
with.
well, thank you all. It was my pleasure. And this is one of the best downtowns in New Jersey. This is one of the best cared-for communities I've ever been in. So you have a lot to be proud of, and your work in the DRO will make sure that it remains as best it can that way. So good job. Thank you.
We're gonna miss you.
Yeah.
Had no idea.
Well,
dude.
and then that
There
one.
you go.
Yeah.
Wait. Motion denied?
New chapter. Yeah.
Good for you.
So
All right. Well, when's your last day?
August 8th.
Oh, really
Wow.
soon, really
I
soon.
gave
yeah.
a month, yeah.
Special meeting August 7th.
That's right.
Well, on that sad note,
Yeah, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to buzzkill, but I
Would
didn't
have had a
want
cake or
I didn't want
something
to
if we
leave
knew.
without saying thank you to everybody, so.
Well, thank you.
Yes.
no, really, thank you. All right, folks, I'll adjourn. I guess a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second? Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you.